Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, continuing our deep dive into this Georgia program, heading into spring practice, fall camp, the 2024 season. Took a look at the Georgia offensive line last week. Now we're taking a look at this Georgia defensive line and a unit that, to be clear, 99% of Power 5 programs would take this Georgia defensive line that you saw in 2023. But if you ask Kirby Smart, was this Georgia defensive line up to the standard that you expect within this Georgia program? I'm guessing he would say it wasn't. And this is a unit that is extremely young. I think you're going to see some massive steps from some of these young players in 2024. Want to get into looking back at that 2023 year, talking a little bit about what I saw on the film, and then start taking a look at who are going to be the contributors up front for this Georgia defensive line in 2024. Really excited to get into this one. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys, and it truly has been a blast doing these deep dives into these programs heading into spring practice. I continue to learn a ton from you guys, so would love to hear your input, your breakout players in the comment section. And of course, if y'all do enjoy the content, you want to support the boys, consider subscribing to the channel. Again, thank you guys so much for all the support, all the interaction. I'm having a blast and can't thank you guys enough for rocking with the boys. And without further ado, I want to get into a little bit about what we saw from this Georgia defensive line in 2023. And again, to preface this conversation, this was a Georgia defense that only allowed 16 points per game. That was top 7 in the country, only 4.7 yards per play, top 10 in the country. This was still one of the best defenses that you saw in the country. And I remember taking a lot of heat about 6 months ago, 8 months ago, when we were looking at this Georgia roster and saying, I think the strength of this Georgia defense was probably in the back end as opposed to in the front seven on that defensive line heading into 2023. And I think you probably saw that play out. Now, this Georgia defensive line, again, very, very dominant. 99% of Power 5 programs, again, taking this defensive line. But you start looking at some of the things you want to see this Georgia program improve on up front heading into 2024. I think it starts with pass rush. When you watch the film of this Georgia defensive line playing the run, extremely disciplined, phenomenal at getting off blocks. It is tough sledding running on this Georgia program every single Saturday you play them. But when you look back at the games that they struggled in, again, lost one game to Alabama in the SEC championship game, I think the number one thing you're looking for a little bit more of is that pass rush. You take a look at some of the numbers, and I was kind of doing a little research, watching some film, but also looking at some of the numbers that we saw from this unit last year. Jalen Walker led the team in sacks with 5 sacks. Outside of that, you look at some of the edge rushers and that defensive line in general. I think the pass rush win rate, the amount of players winning their one-on-ones and getting after the quarterback probably left a little bit to be desired. Now, I think what you're most excited about for Georgia heading into 2024, and you look at the scholarship distribution, I get the graphic, a little bit outdated with some guys who declared for the NFL draft, but you look at this scholarship distribution up front, and there's one thing you see. It's young. And it was a young group last year, and it's going to be a young group in 2024. But I think most importantly, you're going to see jumps from these guys going from year 1 to year 2, from year 2 to year 3. And I think that's what you're most excited about. It's one thing to grab a returner coming back for their 5th or 6th year in college football. It's another thing to get a guy along the line of scrimmage who's coming back for year 2. That's when you see the biggest jump from these young guys along the line of scrimmage. And I think for Georgia, that's probably what you're most excited about and looking to what this unit's going to shake out to be in 2024. There are a lot of names that I want to buzz by, but at the edge position, we're going to include that Jack linebacker in this conversation. I think that's what you're most excited about is the youth that you have coming back. And I want to start with the guy that I thought flashed, and you want to see more consistency from this player, especially in the run game. And I think that kind of limited his snaps in 2023. But if you see strides in the run game, I think this might be Georgia's best pass rusher, pure pass rusher in 2024. And that's Jalen Walker. And you take a look at the numbers, led the team in sacks, only played 244 snaps on the season, 19 quarterback hurries, a pass rush win rate of 21.5%. And to put that in a little bit of context, the guy, Micah Williams, only an 11.2% pass rush win rate, which is still a very good number. But I think that highlights, how good Jalen Walker was in 2023 when he was asked to pin his ears back and go get after the quarterback. That first step off the line of scrimmage is devastating to opposing tackles. And again, a guy that is young, kind of moving up there and kind of getting a little bit more playing time and experience and getting that body right. I think Jalen Walker could be a really special edge rusher for the Georgia Bulldogs in 2024. Next guy I want to talk about, Damon Wilson, a guy that only was a true freshman, didn't play over 100 snaps, a guy that when you saw him on the field, you saw the flashes. And you're very confident that going into year 2 again, you're going to see some of those strides in the right direction. 8 quarterback hurries, a 20% pass rush win rate, which is astronomically high. And I get it's a low sample size, but again, you saw that first step and that different level of twitch from a guy like Damon Wilson. Really excited about him. And then a guy like Mykel Williams playing that defensive end role. I think Mykel Williams probably didn't take the steps that we expected them to take after that true freshman year, but this is still a guy that's starting on most Power 5 teams across the country. You look forward to see what his steps are going into year 3. You have a guy in Chaz Chambliss who probably not the best pure pass rusher for this Georgia program, but a guy that probably gets underappreciated, and there's a reason why he's coming back. There's a reason why Georgia's taking him back. What he does in the run game, how disciplined he is, maintaining leverage and playing that edge position, that is, again, it's a thankless job a lot of times. You're not stuffing the stat sheet with sacks, tackles for a loss, but he does a damn good job of that. And so, again, having him back, massive. Sam Mpemba coming up, Gabe Harris, Ingram Dawkins. I would even throw in a guy like Joseph Jonah. Jonah as a true freshman that probably makes some moves for this Georgia group in 2024. At the end of the day, and we just talked about 6-7 players that you feel really good about heading into 2024. Not a lot of Power 5 programs can say that. And you look at really what has set Georgia apart, and this is a conversation we have all the time. Not only do they have some of that star talent, but the amount of depth that they have, the amount of rotations they can throw at opposing offensive lines. When you're trying to win a national championship, when you're trying to win 15, 16 games in a college football season, you got to be deep. You got to keep your guys fresh, not only for 4 quarters, but for 4 months of a season. And I think Georgia, with the amount of depth that they have at that edge rusher position, I think kind of sets Georgia apart heading into 2024 and really has been the staple of why Georgia is the premier program in college football right now. Many of you guys know I'm a Michigan fan. If there was one team I did not want to see in the college football playoffs, it was them Georgia Bulldogs. Now you look on the inside, and this is arguably a unit that I'm even more excited about. You have Nazir Stackhouse and Warren Brinson coming back, Warren Brinson, I thought, was phenomenal. A 12% pass rush win rate from the inside, 14 quarterback hurries. Nazir Stackhouse, we all know what he can do at that nose playing the run game. Again, not a stat sheet stuffer, but a guy that is extremely important to this Georgia defense. That is massive in terms of just the high floor that you are getting from Brinson and Stackhouse. You know what you're going to get. That inside of that defensive line with those 2 dogs, they are going to be good. But what I think you're most excited about is what does the jump look like for guys like Jamal Jarrett, for guys like Jordan Hall, who, again, along the line of scrimmage, it's so rare to see true freshmen come in and dominate. These guys are freak show athletes. They needed a little bit more polish. That's where I think you're going to see the biggest jump, right? Getting a full offseason under your belt, getting another winter conditioning, spring practice, summer workouts, fall camp. Jamal Jarrett and Jordan Hall, from what you've seen from the development of the Georgia defensive line, you're probably most excited about what those 2 look like heading into 2024. And I don't think it's out of the question to talk about those 2 guys potentially getting some starting work for Georgia just because of the progression that you're going to see from those 2 guys going into 2024. Throwing in a few other guys, I thought Christian Miller, going back, watching some film, Christian Miller was phenomenal for this Georgia program in 2023, especially at the end of that season. Really excited about him. Xavier McLeod coming in from the portal. This is a guy that's going 325 pounds right now. Another rotational piece that could give you that high upside starting spot, but another guy that you're rotating in. So now what did we just talk about? Nazir Stackhouse, Brinson, Jamal Jarrett, Jordan Hall, Christian Miller, Xavier McLeod. 3 deep of defensive linemen, 6 guys that you feel really good about heading into 2024. That's one competition. If you want to play significant reps for the Georgia Bulldogs, you're going to have to be great. Right? If these young guys want to beat out Nazir Stackhouse and beat out Warren Brinson for that starting spot, you are going to have to perform. You're going to have to progress. And that is what Kirby Smart wants. That's truly, I think, the secret of this Georgia Bulldogs program. I mean, just getting a ton of talent, a ton of competition to the point where if you're starting for this Georgia program and getting significant reps, you're going to have to be great. That's just how this roster has played out. I throw in a guy like Nasir Johnson coming in as a true freshman that probably cracks the rotation to a certain extent. And at the end of the day, a very similar conversation that we had with the Georgia offensive line last week. This is a group that's deep. It's full of competition. You talk about the secret for Georgia and how they've dominated college football for the last couple of years. It starts along the line of scrimmage. There's a ton of young talent that you expect to make that jump in 2024. There's not a program that you trust more to develop all this young talent on the defensive line than what the Georgia Bulldogs have done the last couple of years. This is a unit that I think probably was not up to the standard in 2023. And I think you're probably going to see a massive bounce back for this Georgia defensive line in 2024. Ton of young talent continuing to get developed. My leading sack, my prediction, I'm going Jalen Walker. I think this is a guy that has that different level of juice as a pure pass rusher, and whether he's starting for Georgia, whether he's rotating in on those passing downs, I think it's going to be an absolute menace in the pass rush. Damon Wilson, probably another guy that I'm keeping my eye on. At the end of the day, a ton of talent, a ton of depth from this group, and I would expect it to be, again, one of the best defensive lines that we see in the country heading into 2024. Next week, we take a look at the offensive skill, a position group that I think a lot of people are assuming is going to take a dip with Brock Bowers, Rosemy Jackson heading to the league. Group that has a lot of young talent, has done a lot of work in the transfer portal. Really excited to talk about that group next week. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. It truly has been a blast doing these deep dives. Again, I learned a ton from you guys. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments section, and we'll talk to y'all later.